My fiancé Syed, stop being cheap. This is a once-in-a-lifetime day. It's only $35,000 for our wedding. I replied, okay, realizing she saw my safety net as party money, until she told me who I had to choose. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I'm sitting here at 2 a.m. questioning everything about the last 3.5 years of my life. I'm Dawson, 35M, work in sales for an industrial equipment company. Not glamorous, but it pays well, and I've always been careful with money. I live in a modest house that I paid off 2 years ago, drive a reliable truck that's 8 years old, and I've got about 6 months of expenses saved up as my emergency fund. That money isn't for vacations or toys. It's my safety net so I can walk away from any job that becomes toxic without worrying about making rent. My fiancée Blair, 27F, and I have been together for 3.5 years, engaged for 6 months. She works the front desk at a medical clinic, scheduling appointments and handling billing. We've talked about getting married for over a year, and I thought we were on the same page about keeping things simple and affordable. Yesterday, we had our first meeting with a wedding planner. I thought we were just getting information, maybe learning about options and timelines. I figured we'd walk away with some brochures and talk everything through before making any decisions. That's not what happened. Blair had apparently been planning this meeting for weeks. She had a Pinterest board, a guest list, a venue in mind, the whole thing mapped out. The wedding planner started going through costs: venue rental, catering, flowers, photography, DJ, the works. When she got to the total, I felt my stomach drop. So we're looking at approximately $35,000 for everything on your list, the planner said, like she was discussing the weather. I looked at Blair, waiting for her to laugh or say that was way too much. Instead, she nodded like this was completely expected. That sounds perfect, Blair said. Then she turned to me. You can just transfer that from your savings account, right? It won't even make a dent. I sat there for a second, trying to process what I'd just heard. Blair, that's more than half my emergency fund. So, it's not like you're going to need all that money sitting in the bank. This is our wedding day. It's supposed to be special. The wedding planner excused herself to give us privacy, and I tried to explain why that money was important to me, how it represented security, freedom from having to stay in a job that might turn bad, protection against unexpected expenses. You're being paranoid, Blair said. You have a good job. You're not going to get fired. And even if something happened, we'd figure it out. This is a once-in-a-lifetime day. That phrase, we'd figure it out, hit me wrong. Because in my experience, when people say, we'll figure it out, they usually mean, you'll figure it out. I told the planner we needed time to think about it, and we left. The car ride home was tense. Blair kept saying I was being cheap and that I clearly didn't care about making our wedding special. I kept trying to explain that it wasn't about the money itself. It was about what that money represented. But here's what really bothers me. She didn't ask if I was comfortable spending that much. She didn't suggest we look at less expensive options. She just assumed that because I have savings, it was available for whatever she wanted to spend it on. I've been lying awake thinking about what this means for our future. If she sees my emergency fund as money that's available to spend on a party, what happens when we're married and she wants to renovate the kitchen or take an expensive vacation? Am I being unreasonable for wanting to keep my financial safety net intact? Or is she right that I'm being cheap about our wedding day? Edit. Some people are asking about her financial situation. Blair lives with her parents and has minimal expenses. I assumed she had some savings of her own, but we've never really talked numbers in detail. Maybe that's part of the problem. Update 1. The responses to my last post really opened my eyes, especially the ones asking about Blair's financial situation. I realized we'd been together for over 3 years, and I had no clear picture of her money habits or savings. That seemed like something we should probably sort out before planning a wedding. So yesterday, I suggested we sit down and go through our finances together. Nothing judgmental, just laying everything on the table so we could make informed decisions about the wedding and our future. Blair was resistant at first. She said it felt like I was interrogating her and that couples don't need to share every financial detail. But I explained that if we're planning to merge our lives, we should understand what we're working with. What I found out was eye-opening. Blair has no savings. 0. She lives with her parents, pays them $300 a month for room and board, covers her car payment and insurance, and spends the rest. When I asked where her money goes, she got defensive and said she doesn't track every dollar like I do. But that's not even the worst part. She has about $8,000 in credit card debt spread across 3 cards, and she's been making minimum payments for the past 2 years. The interest alone is costing her hundreds of dollars a month. When I saw the numbers, I tried to stay calm. Blair, before we think about a wedding, maybe we should focus on getting this debt paid off. If we put the $35,000 toward your credit cards and built up some savings together, we'd be starting our marriage on much stronger ground. She looked at me like I'd suggested we elope in a gas station. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said. You're more concerned about spreadsheets than our relationship. A wedding isn't just an expense, Dawson. It's an investment in our future. It's showing our families and friends that we're serious about each other. We can show we're serious without spending $35,000. Easy for you to say. You already own a house. You have money saved. You've had your whole adult life to build stability. Now that it's time to celebrate our relationship, suddenly you want to be practical. That stung because there was some truth in it. I have had more time to build financial stability. But what bothered me was the implication that my financial responsibility was somehow unfair to her, or that I owed her an expensive wedding to make up for the difference in our situations. We talked for another hour, but we kept going in circles. She wants the wedding she's been dreaming about since she was little. I want to start our marriage without immediately destabilizing my financial security. What really concerns me is how she views my savings. It's not play money or wedding money. It's my insurance policy against life's uncertainties. The fact that she sees it as available to spend on a party makes me wonder if we have fundamentally different views about money and planning for the future. I suggested we look at smaller venues or off-season dates that might cost less. She said that would be settling and asked why her dream wedding should suffer because I'm too paranoid to use money that's just sitting there doing nothing. I don't know how to bridge this gap. I love Blair, but I'm starting to realize we might be incompatible in ways that go deeper than just the wedding budget. My friend Gage asked me a question yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. Is she marrying you, or is she marrying your savings account? I wish I knew the answer. Update 2. The financial conversation from my last update was just the beginning of what's turned into the worst week of my relationship. After we talked about the wedding budget, I thought we might find some middle ground. Maybe a smaller celebration. Maybe we could wait another year while she paid down her debt and saved some money. I was willing to compromise on a lot of things. But during that conversation, something else came up that changed everything. Blair asked about a recurring $1,700 monthly transfer she'd noticed in my bank statements. I'd never hidden it, but I also hadn't specifically discussed it with her because it predates our relationship. I've been helping my brother Rhett pay his mortgage for the past 2 years. He's an HVAC tech, good at his job, but his daughter needed major heart surgery when she was 5. Even with insurance, the medical bills were crushing. Rhett had already borrowed against his house to pay for the initial surgery and follow-up care. Here's the thing, when I was going through college, Rhett helped cover a big chunk of my tuition. He was working full-time while I was studying, and he made sure I graduated without massive student loans. When his family hit this crisis, helping him wasn't even a question. It was paying back a debt of gratitude. The plan has always been 2 more years of payments, which would cover the remaining balance on his mortgage. After that, he'd be free from the medical debt and could start rebuilding savings for his family. I explained all of this to Blair, expecting her to understand. My brother had sacrificed for my education, and now I was in a position to help him through a crisis. Her reaction was not what I expected. So you're giving your brother $20,000 a year, but you won't spend $35,000 on our wedding? It's not the same thing, Blair. This is helping family through a medical emergency. And our wedding isn't important? I'm going to be your family too, but apparently your brother comes first. I tried to explain that it wasn't about priorities. It was about honoring a commitment to someone who'd helped me when I needed it. But she wasn't hearing it. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. If you can afford to give your brother that much money, you can definitely afford our wedding. Maybe it's time to choose what's more important. I stared at her. Are you asking me to stop helping my brother? I'm asking you to prioritize our future instead of supporting a grown man who should be handling his own problems. That night, I called Rhett and told him what was happening. He immediately offered to figure out another way to handle the remaining payments, said he didn't want to cause problems in my relationship. But here's what hit me. Rhett was willing to sacrifice his financial stability to protect my relationship. Blair was asking me to sacrifice my family obligation to fund her dream wedding. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Yesterday, Blair brought it up again. She'd been thinking about it, she said, and she'd decided this was actually a good thing because it showed we could afford a nicer wedding if I redirected that money. Just for 2 years, she said. We get married, have our celebration, and then after that you can go back to helping your brother if you want. Blair, this isn't money I can just turn on and off. Rhett is counting on this. His family is counting on this. And I'm counting on you to make our wedding special. I thought you loved me enough to make that happen. That's when she delivered the ultimatum. Either you commit to our wedding and stop sending money to your brother, or we don't have a future together. I'm not marrying someone who puts everyone else before his own wife. I asked for time to think about it. She said I had until this weekend to decide. I've spent the last 3 days going over every conversation we've had about money, family, and future plans. What I see now is a pattern I missed before. She doesn't just want to spend my emergency fund, she wants to control how I use my money, period. She wants me to cut financial ties with my family to prove my loyalty to her. My friend Gage was right. She's not marrying me. She's marrying the financial stability I represent, and she wants to be the only one who benefits from it. I think I know what I have to do. I just need to find the courage to do it. Final update, I ended my engagement 2 days ago, and while it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, I'm already feeling relief. After Blair's ultimatum about choosing between the wedding and helping my brother, I spent the weekend thinking about what kind of marriage we'd actually have. Every scenario I imagined involved her monitoring my spending, questioning my financial decisions, and treating my family obligations as competition for her desires. That's not a partnership. That's financial control dressed up as love. Monday morning, I called the wedding planner and canceled everything. We hadn't signed any contracts yet, so there were no cancellation fees. Then I drove to Blair's work and asked if we could talk during her lunch break. I kept it simple. I can't marry someone who wants me to choose between my family and our relationship. This isn't about the money. It's about values, and ours don't align. She immediately started crying and asking if there was anything she could say to change my mind. When I said no, the tears turned to anger pretty quickly. You're throwing away 3 years for your brother's problems. You're going to regret this. You're 35 years old, Dawson. How many more chances do you think you're going to get? That last comment told me everything I needed to know about how she really saw me. I asked for the ring back. She said she needed to think about it, which legally she's allowed to do in our state since she didn't break the engagement. Honestly, I don't care about the ring anymore. Consider it the cost of learning who she really was before I married her. But here's where it gets complicated. My family. My mom called me Tuesday night, furious. Apparently Blair had already talked to her and my sister Sloane, telling them I'd called off the wedding because I was too selfish to spend money on love. Dawson, you're being ridiculous, my mom said. She's a lovely girl, and you're not getting any younger. So what if she wants a nice wedding? You can afford it. Then my sister called. Mom told me what happened. Are you seriously going to stay single forever because you don't want to spend money on a wedding? What I discovered over the next day was disturbing. Blair had been working on my family for weeks, probably months. She'd been having conversations with my mom and sister about wedding planning, sharing her vision for the ceremony, and apparently painting me as cheap and stubborn for not immediately embracing her plans. My mom actually said, "Blair showed me some beautiful venue options. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about giving her the wedding she deserves." Giving her? I said. Mom, she has $8,000 in credit card debt and no savings. She wants me to spend half my emergency fund on a party. Oh, everyone has a little debt when they're young. You're being too harsh. That's when I realized Blair hadn't just been planning a wedding. She'd been building a support network to pressure me into compliance. She'd positioned herself as the victim of my financial stinginess and enlisted my own family to argue her case. The conversation with my sister was even worse. Dawson, you make good money. You own your house. What else are you going to spend that money on? At least this way, you get a wife out of it. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if the housing market crashes and I need to relocate? You're catastrophizing. Normal people don't plan for every possible disaster. But that's exactly the difference between Blair and me. I do plan for disasters because I've seen what happens when people don't. I've watched friends lose their houses because they had no emergency fund. I've seen how quickly financial stress can destroy relationships. My friend Gage was the only person who understood. You dodged a bullet, man. If she's already trying to control your money and turn your family against you before the wedding, imagine what marriage would have been like. Yesterday, I transferred the usual $1,700 to help with Rhett's mortgage. Then I called him and told him the engagement was off, but nothing about our arrangement was changing. You sure about this? He asked. I meant what I said before. I can figure out another way if this is causing problems. Rhett, you helped me get through college when you could have used that money for your own life. Now I'm in a position to help you through a crisis. That's what family does. Anyone who asks me to abandon that isn't someone I want to build a life with. I'm not going to lie, this hurts. I loved Blair, or at least I loved who I thought she was. But I can't build a marriage with someone who sees my financial security as her spending money and my family obligations as obstacles to her desires. The hardest part is realizing how much of our relationship was built on different assumptions. She assumed my savings were our money once we got engaged. She assumed I'd prioritize her wants over my existing commitments. She assumed she could use my family to pressure me into compliance. I assumed she understood that my financial caution was what allowed me to be generous when it mattered. I assumed she valued the same things I did: stability, family loyalty, living below our means to have options. I assumed wrong. I'm 35, and yeah, maybe my options are more limited than they were 10 years ago, but I'd rather be single and financially secure than married to someone who wants to control how I live and spend and prioritize. The emergency fund stays intact. The house stays paid off. The commitment to my brother stays firm. And I stay true to the values that got me here. Some people might call it stubborn. I call it knowing what I can and can't live with. Edit. For those asking about my family relationships, I'm taking a break from my mom and sister until they can respect my decision. They're still pushing for me to work things out with Blair, which tells me they fundamentally don't understand what the problem was. Until they do, I need some space. Edit 2. The ring situation resolved itself. Blair mailed it back yesterday with a note saying she hoped I'd be happy, alone with my precious savings. I'm returning the ring to the jeweler for a full refund since it's been less than 30 days. That money goes straight back to the emergency fund, where it belongs.